Warning! This episode contains graphic language, torture dreams, robot dragons, self-discovery, and as always, teen angst. Also, there'll be spoilers for chapters 49 through 57 of Inheritance, Book 4 of the Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. Listen at your own risk.
Is this a podcast, or is this just fantasy? We're just two nerds and we love our fantasy. So join us if you want to nerd out. Time to start the podcast and see. Anyway, here's the show.
Hello, readers. I'm Dane Patterson, the host who has also found the true understanding of his soul by sitting on a pole. I am enlightened now, everyone. No, shh. There it is. I just wanted 3.
And I'm Jackie Lanier, and is this a podcast or is this just fantasy or is this meditation hour? It's hard to say. This is the podcast that's firmly in favor of fearless moral inventory and radical self-acceptance,
yes,
as long as it's for other people, or better yet, fictional characters.
Yeah.
That's really what you want.
100%. I'm only pretending to understand my soul. I don't know. If you want to join some of our fellow listeners and supporting us on Patreon, there's a link in the show notes.
Yes.
As soon as we have a couple more subscribers, we're going to kick off our bonus book club over there, where we'll put out exclusive one-shot episodes covering standalones or other series. Who knows? We'll get wild with it.
Yes, I'm excited. But in the meantime, you can check out our website at isthisjustfantasypod.com for our full Inheritance episode archive. If somehow you made it here to episode 7 of season 4 without knowing that those are there. But you can also follow us on social media. We're on TikTok at isthisjustfantasypod and on Instagram at justfantasypod. And before we head into the woods with Aragon to reach Nirvana, I want to look back for just a touch at last episode's all-out creep fest that got us here. It's really
It was weird.
Hard pivot.
Yeah.
We started with our recently kidnapped and technically deposed Queen President, waking restrained in a massive spooky chamber, just waiting for her torture to start. But our girl's backbone is ironclad, and she keeps her shit together enough to game plan her interrogation approach and lay the groundwork to manipulate her beautiful-handed jailer. And then it finally happens, Dane. Galba fucking Torrance makes his entrance on screen and totally delivers on the Jaws-style setup we've been getting for almost 4 whole books at this point.
Yeah.
He's domineering, he's basically omniscient, and he's entirely too persuasive for some on this podcast. And he's really enjoying using Murtagh as his puppet to torture Nasuada. But we get a brief respite from shaking in our boots with a hard pivot to Saphira and Aragon, just enjoying a beautiful flight down memory lane on the way to Rowengard, treating us all to a fucking epic bedtime story from Glader about his and Oramis's narrow escape from 2 of the Forsworn in the early days of Gal's coup. Do you think you're going to be recycling that little tale for your son anytime soon,
Oh,
Dane?
I can't wait to tell him about the
Just
time.
violence and horror. But we can't just live in a fantasy land forever, Dane.
We would never do that.
Nasuada is dealing with a bleak reality, and we have to talk about it. She's still getting the classic 1-2 combo move of hot pokers and cynical historical framing from Murtagh and Gal, respectively, when, and this is true, our emo boy emos harder than maybe anyone has ever emoed. By your own reckoning,
Yeah.
he's reached German epic pagan death metal tier of emo, if I'm correct.
Yes, that is correct.
And it drives him to basically start drunk dialing Nasuada with clandestine visits to her cell where he pours his heart out, heals her, and tries to persuade her that resistance is futile. Nasuada, of course, comes out with the moral high ground here, which is impressive considering she ends up murdering her portly vacant jailer with a spoon. She still is the moral superior of Murtagh.
100%.
And it's back again over to Aragon, Saphira, and Glader, wrapping up the trek to Rowengard with a primordial sea monster encounter, a storm of mythical proportions, and a brief interlude in outer space that makes this whole war business seem just a touch trivial, maybe.
We're all just so small. in the
So
grand
small,
scheme
you
of
wouldn't
things.
believe it. But enough of that seed of existentialism. You know our torture porn episode episode had to end with Nasuada. After her doomed escape attempt, Gal unleashes his body horror coup de grace, the Burrow Grubs. She bears it with as much grit and determination as we'd come to expect from this badass, if not more. And the episode wrapped up with something that is going to sound out of a different story when I say it, but I swear it totally makes sense when it's happening. The last line in our last section was Murtagh executing the only successful flirting of this series so far with a cinematic as hell, you know why, to Nasuada.
There it is.
End scene. Except not end scene.
Oh.
This is the beginning of the episode, Dane.
Oh. Okay.
Surprise.
Oh, wow.
And we fucking made it.
Yeah, we did it.
It's Spirit Vision Quest time.
I can't wait.
We're about to jump in, but before we do, this got me thinking, what like epic natural landscape would you pick for your Spirit Quest? Obviously, Aragon is on this ancient island surrounded by a ring of fire.
I am in the ice.
Okay.
It's cold. There's
Yes.
mountains and wind. And I have, for some reason, no jacket on. And I'm in cross-legged
That's part of it for
during
sure.
a snowstorm.
Yes.
Yeah.
What does the whole thing look like? What like
Oh, like the montage?
what flavor does your Spirit
Montage.
Quest take?
There's lots of weightlifting. For some reason, I'm like lifting boulders.
I don't think that
Throwing
counts.
boulders.
You
No?
already do that. Your Spirit Quest is like something that pushes you far outside the bounds of your comfort zone, Dave.
Oh, that's so hard for me.
That's what I like about it. See me, I'm lifting weights
Yes.
for some
Oh,
reason, and
no.
it's horrible, but I find myself there.
Gosh, I'm probably doing something like nature. I'm hiking up vistas.
Just trudging endlessly up
Yes.
like steep hills and being rewarded with beautiful views at the end. But it takes you like at
Yes.
least 5 or 6 big ass hills to like really appreciate the beauty. Because every time you get up there, you're like, does it slap the way I wanted?
And maybe I have to like bring old ladies on my shoulders to their huts or something. I don't know. Something weird's going on.
Yeah.
What's yours? Wait, you're lifting weights?
Well, yeah, if it's out of my comfort zone, I think I was thinking like desert, like sand dune desert, like empty.
Weird. We both picked like empty.
Yeah. Well, because I like
Environments.
to be in a forest. So
Okay.
I
that
feel
makes
like
sense.
it's not. Maybe this is just me, but if there's no struggle, Dane, what's it all been about?
It's not just
if
you.
it's not pain,
You know full well it's not just you.
if it's not difficult, is it a Spirit quest?
Miami, I thought was a beach, but then I was like, well, it can't be that. That's where I
nice.
want to be.
That's lovely. Exactly.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I think I'd be like, you know how some of them are like Spirit Quest where you're hallucinating, or like, or I think that's Vision Quest, or Spirit Quest where you're like accomplishing some tasks.
Yeah.
Some are like your hunt for your spirit animal.
Ooh.
Do you have any? I think I'm like hallucination Vision Quest because I'd have a hard time with that. That would scare me that my brain was never going to go back to normal again.
No, I'm doing like hunting for my spirit animal with like
Yeah.
a spear, and I have to survive in the environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Except
How-
for then when you find it, you cannot kill it.
No, because it is me.
Strong agree. I
Yes.
like that.
That's how I became the Bear of the North. This is
Of
all part of the
course.
story.
Wielding enemies sorrow. I was about to say justice. Really, I
Yes.
really want to.
There's a whole mythology to these people now.
Yes. Perfect.
Awesome. Well, should we move on?
I think it's time.
Or would you like
Speaking-
to talk about peyote a little bit more in your spirit quest?
Well, no, we have to Aragon's peyote spirit
Oh,
quest.
okay. Here we go,
We're
here we
busy, Dane.
That brings us to chapter 49, Amid the Ruins. We come back this week with our boy Aragon, and he's in
Yes.
Rowengard,
He
baby.
made it.
Land of the Dragon Riders, and if you thought the doors were compensating for something with Trondheim, then woo! This place sounds huge in scale on a whole nother level.
God.
What were they compensating for?
Hard to know.
It's hard to tell. Never mind. I have more jokes about elves, but I'm
We
moving
know.
on. Aragon is looking at these ruins of his ancient order, and this giant valley is filled with structures so large that each one could encompass all of Carvajal.
That was wild.
Like the windows are as large as castle gates. It's all very fun.
Yeah.
This is something I can't wait to see in the show. Actually,
Yes.
it's one of the few things that I'm like, I need to see that. I want to see that.
On film, on
Yeah.
wax.
I want to see what they do. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Unfortunately, Rowengard has seen better days.
Aw.
It's a bit overgrown with ivy and moss covering everything, blending it in with the natural that surrounds it. And this must be like creepy as hell. But also, I'm thinking beautiful.
Yeah,
enchanting, haunting.
It definitely seems, like it's got some like melancholy beauty to it, basically.
Yeah. Interesting tidbit I liked was that the architecture is of elven make, but with a much less natural look, more impressive, full of authority, with ancient human vibes thrown in for good measure. Some of the designs even remind Aragon of some of the houses in Carvajal.
Interesting.
And we keep getting, it's not the first time, we keep getting throwbacks to the Palancar King. I think this is more of that.
Yes, that
Carvajal.
Insane old coot.
Yeah, little tidbit I thought was also interesting was there's where spells to control where the plants grew.
Oh, yeah.
Like in patterns.
Yeah.
And some are still obviously doing their work, which again is a little fun combination of beauty and strangeness.
Down for that.
It's for sure a ruin, as pretty much every building is damaged in some way, and the destruction radiates out from a giant 30-foot deep crater in the south of the city. And speaking of giant blast scars, Galdar hooks Aragon and Saphira up with some much-needed protection.
Okay.
Aragon casts a spell that he has pretty much no idea about, and it protects them from what sounds like nuclear radiation.
Yes, that was definitely the vibe I got.
Yeah. Well, the backstory of this is that the writer named Thuviel accidentally nuked the place in the fight with the Forsworn.
It's not really what you want.
Yeah, kind of a good news, bad news situation. Good news is that he killed one of the Forsworn. Bad news is that he's killed a bunch of good riders and ruined Dora Reba for all time.
Oh.
Mixed bag.
Just a little mix there.
Just a little mixed bag.
You have killed a Forsworn, but at what cost, Dane?
I don't know. Victory over the enemy, I would say. They fly around taking in the sights on an exhausted Saphira. And while our poor girl is basically on death's door, Aragon is getting a fun and aerial tour in history. It's kind of sad, though.
Yeah, she's like fucking beat.
Yeah. Glader is very much still connected to this ruined place, so both dragons are in a bit of a funk.
Yeah.
But Aragon's having a great time.
Great. The boy wizard is stoked.
Yeah. They get to fly... They begin to fly by lots of dragon bones, so I'm kind of seeing why Glader is a little bummed.
Oh, yep.
But I'm also kind of seeing how these are like very cool to look at. Some of them have 80-foot-long ribs or skulls that are larger than Saphira's whole body.
Dude.
Side note, the biggest boy is apparently Belgabad, the greatest of the wild dragons.
Beefy boy.
This chunky boy came to help the riders and was the largest dragon in existence at the time of the riders' conflict with Galatorix. We learn this dude is related to Rugmar. You won't forget Rugmar the Black, who is Saphira's great-great-great-great-granddad.
Okay.
We also learn that the dragons of that age and size spent most of their time sleeping and having lucid dreams about whatever interests them.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, can that be my retirement plan? That sounds lovely.
That does sound nice. They just wake up occasionally to eat.
Yeah, that sounds great. We also learned that there was a bit of a dislike between the wild dragons and bound dragons.
Okay.
The wild dragons thought that the bound dragons were a little too tame, and the bound dragons thought the wild dragons were a little too driven by animalistic instinct.
Drama.
Yeah. Yes. This thought led Glader into a topic that is true in the real world, too. Mm-hmm. Language changes people more than you think, and the fact that wild dragons could not speak a language like the bonded dragons made them more different than just the bond alone would have made them.
Okay.
This is actually a very interesting thing about humans as well.
Yeah.
Children who have been abused by not being talked to have different parts of their brains become active when they do start to talk, and it changes their personality, essentially. This is very interesting. If you want a deep well of case studies to read about or watch documentaries about, I think the most famous is probably a documentary about a girl named Jeannie that I can link in the show notes.
Okay.
Full disclosure, it is sad.
Yeah.
But it is interesting.
It's
from
really tragic, but
a human standpoint.
Yeah.
But back to our fun little Vrongard history lesson. Saphira finally literally just fucking collapses while they're talking. It's extremely sad, but fucking hilarious.
I know. I feel like I was reading this and I was like, you guys, you're dragon. What the hell?
Aragon rode her like snowfire, pushing her like a common horse running through the desert. It was so funny.
Dude.
He just says, thanks, and starts looking around, I guess.
I feel like he really meant it. They had a little moment.
He's like, good job. I guess Aragon can't share his energy when he's on vacation.
He's busy.
At the end
he's
of the...
relaxing. Dave.
Well, it gets worse.
He had a hard flight.
It was rough for him. At the end of his chapter, Aragon finally finds the rock of Kuthian.
Okay.
They just stare at it a bit.
Yeah.
Kind of just contemplating, what do we do here?
Yeah, I remember reading this and being like, already? You sure?
You just
It's just here?
right now.
Okay.
Okay. But ultimately, with Glader's guidance, they decide to stop and rest. So
Okay.
Aragon walks to find a place for him and Saphira to sleep.
Aw.
I'm just kidding. He climbs back in the saddle and makes her walk them to find their camp. Amazing.
Dude.
Poor Saphira. She's getting the snow fire treatment the whole
She
way.
really, really is. I also... I was like, Aragon, what the actual fuck, for one. And two, I didn't realize he rode her over, like, the ground.
Either did I.
That's wild.
I guess, okay, now that we're thinking about it, right? She's huge.
Yeah.
So, like, if she was just walking slow,
She covers a large... It's like
I
people
mean, he
riding
would be
elephants.
running. But I guess he can run for days at a
Yes,
time.
that's kind of my, like...
So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Seems like a wild choice for Aragon, especially considering she's...
She's like dragging. He's like, hey, hold on. I'm going to climb on up.
I think she's like panting at one point.
He's like, my feetsies are hurting me, so I need to...
Dude, shocking stuff. But that does take us to chapter 50, Snalgli for 2.
What was that?
Snalgli for 2,
Nice,
Dane. This chapter starts with Aragon waking late that same day after they get a little nap, and he decides very graciously to let Saphira continue sleeping. It's like, yes, finally. He's listening to the sounds of the forest, and something about like the weird squirrels that are here is like really setting his stump senses to tingling.
Weird.
And it's starting to give me the creeps a little bit too, the more it like comes up and he mentions it. But like any good horror movie main character, Aragon heads straight into the darkening woods alone to investigate. It's like, don't do that.
Yeah, why are you doing this?
The forest feels super menacing to him, even though it's seemingly devoid of predators. But it isn't long before he stumbles into a nest of what we now know are burrow grubs. And I gave a little jump when I read that. I totally forgot Aragon runs into them on Vroengard. And I thought it was interesting. Glader says they must be a new species to Alagasia. He doesn't know shit about them. And he says they should not exist. Like there's something so like fundamentally like off
Weird
with
about
them. Yeah. It looks like the grubs managed to eat an entire deer clean off its bones where Aragon sees them. So he makes the prudent decision to steer very clear of them and head like back to Saphira. He's like, okay, that's enough forest
like,
exploration for me.
Can't go outside.
Yes, exactly. Well, once he's back in the clearing, Aragon is surprised when 4 shadow creatures in the treetops turn out to be the source of those weird squirrel-like noises. He ends up spooking them when he tries to creep backwards, and then they shapeshift into like cursed looking owls and fly away. So Aragon picks up the pace straight back to Saphira. He's like, okay, absolutely none of this. Everything here is bad.
I don't like any of this.
Yes, and when she and Glader catch up on like the creepy forest adventure, Glader concludes that the nuclear blast must have warped this land and its inhabitants into something sinister and unnatural is the conclusion he draws from it.
Yikes.
Yes. So with the prospects of hunting looking a little slim, Saphira heads back to bed. She's like, well, I can't eat. Guess I should sleep. And Aragon and Glader spend an evening doing a nice little fireside history chat with a side of a show because Glader screens like a vision of Vroengard at the height of its glory for Aragon.
Cool.
It was pretty cool. I'm really feeling the melancholy, I think, in Glader in these last 2 chapters. And I like that it feels like something like separate from his anger and his like deep, deep despair over losing Ormus. Like that's super prominent. But this is something that feels like he just lives with, that he has been living with for as long as Vroengard's been extinct. Yes, but he clearly just isn't ever going to get wholly over this. But it's a part of him. You know, I thought that was a good.
You liked that?
Yeah.
You liked that feeling?
Yeah.
You were like, good, Glader, feel that.
No, I just thought it was well described.
You heard it here first. Clip it and loop it, Kevin.
But as the quickest aside too, both in the writing and in my summary, Aragon sees like a religious looking processional of people through the heart of the city. This is just such a quick scene. And I love the description of this putting him on edge too. And I just want to know who these weirdos are and why they live here, because it's clearly a mystery to Glader as well. He doesn't know much about these people. He brings up like people who worship dragons, but he's like, I don't know. Seems weird.
I feel like Glader's one of those guys who's like, it might have come up. I don't know.
Maybe. And I'm like, Glader, you would remember the hills have eyes. You would know. But mysteries will have to abound for the time being, because we smash cut to Glader raising the alarm in the wee hours to wake Aragon and Saphira because they're under attack from, I kid you not, a giant snail.
Oh, yeah.
This is one thing I did actually remember from this book, and it just makes me laugh. Saphira instantly just like chomps down on the snail, tosses it up in the air, and swallows it whole on its way down, which is shocking. And then she like crisps up another one, like so that Aragon can have it later. She brings Aragon his gigantic escargot, and I think the strain of this war may have finally driven our bean farmer fucking loopy, because he breaks down in like a truly nonsensical fit of laughter while we were reading this. I was like, Dane, I know that this is a joke. I know this is supposed to be funny, but like I do not get it. This just seems like gobbledygook nonsense.
We talked about it for quite a while because I tried to figure out like what was going on.
Why he thinks it's so funny.
It just tickled him.
I just think he's lost his goddamn mind.
Well, it's all that hard work flying and looking for a place to camp.
So
he's tired.
true.
He's exhausted.
That makes perfect sense. But according to Glader, these snails have always been on the island. So these are not cursed nuclear. Don't worry about Saphira because she already ate one. Yeah. These are natural. And they're one of the dragon's favorite meals historically. But Aragon finds the prospect of eating them, like I said, just truly deeply hilarious. But even so, he cleans and buries the snail meat so that they can continue sleeping through to the morning. And the chapter ends with Aragon cooking up his snail breakfast. As it turns out, he has a refined palate for escargot. He likes it.
He's like, ooh, yep.
After all that, he's like, nom, 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 nom.
This got me thinking,
nom.
do you think the Saphira liking it so much bleeds into him?
It's got to.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you think he could eat something and be like, ugh, and then Saphira eat it and go, oh, delicious?
I mean, I'm sure, it's possible, but I think more likely that they enjoy the taste for the same thing. But a lot of love escargot. He talks about how it has this like briny salinity. I'm telling you, refined palate.
Well, we can't meditate on that much longer. Chapter 51 has come. The Rock of Kuthian.
Yes.
And it's finally time. This chapter starts with Aragon and Saphira heading back to the Rock of Kuthian to uncover its magical secret. First, Aragon spends a tight 30 scanning the area for spells, magical traps, and basically any magical dangers that could harm them.
Okay.
Which reveals that the whole island is full of enchantments and spells that run deep into the earth.
Wild.
Affecting as little as a single branch or as much as large swaths of the landscape.
Dude.
Some of these old spells lie dormant because no one is topping them up or the triggers haven't been set off.
Okay.
And our poor little farmer, Aragon, understands mostly none of it.
It was so cool the way this like patchwork of spells was described.
The way this was described was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So it ends up taking him another hour to make sure that any of the spells around them ultimately won't hurt them.
Yeah.
And he gives the tentative, like, I think it's probably good.
It's probably fine.
So it's time. They can try and get in here. So now they're sitting in front of a structure that is essentially a giant spire-shaped rock, which is cool. And these goobers simply just say their names with their minds.
Could you imagine just like walking up to like the Washington Monument and being like, I'm Jacqui.
Yeah, exactly. Aragon declares that he is Aragon Shadeslayer, son of Brahm. And the two dragons do the same thing. Then they attempt it in the ancient language.
Okay, yeah.
And finally, in frustration, Aragon just shouts at the rock for everyone. He's like, that's Saphira! What's good? Anyway. And I have to say that even as a young adult, I immediately recognize this is clearly a true name thing.
Yes, big same.
Did that happen?
Yes,
Yeah.
I was like, maybe I have just been colored by like speak friend and enter, but it's like, this is going to be like a not quite on its surface.
Yeah, this is
say
not
your
going to just
name
be
and
like,
move on.
oh, I'm Aragon. Like, anyway. And also, they're just standing at the door at first, just speaking with their minds. So the scene lacks any majesty.
You know I love that. I was just like, you knew it had to be this? Like, I don't know.
Anyway, I always get a chuckle out of Glader here because he's like, yeah, I had a feeling about that. It's a true name thing. Do you think he's kind of a know-it-all? Do you think Glader's one of those guys?
Yes, either that or he like kind of enjoys watching them like tucker themselves out. He's like, yeah, this probably was it, but like, look at you guys go. You're so cute.
Good for you. You tried.
You were going to get here eventually. It wasn't going to take long for you to shout Aragon Shadeslayer at the rock.
It's so funny.
I don't know. I like that he lives for a little bit of humor in his life, Dane. It's important for him to be happy.
I prefer that reading. I love the reading that he's just ribbing them the whole time.
Yes.
Anyway, this says either turned into a full-fledged spirit quest or it's a very clear trap to control Aragon and Saphira with the true names.
Pretty bad.
And if Gal has set this up, then bravo.
Oh,
that's
just
one hell of
more,
a scheme. Yeah.
One more way. You're very impressed by Galbatorix, our just and rightful ruler.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I think it'd be pretty good. It's probably going to take some time to figure this out, though, if it's a true name thing. Unless, of course, Aragon has brought his peyote and sweat tent in the saddlebags.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Saphir does seem tired. There could be a tent in there.
It's just got a lot of stuff in there. And on that note, I'll wrap this chapter summary up, confident that Aragon will for sure find inner truth in no time.
Yeah. Like a teen. All teens do that, right?
Yeah, it's easy.
Yeah, that does take us to chapter 52, And All the World a Dream. We actually take a departure from our spirit quest for this next chapter. I'm so lucky to be back in Torture World with Nasuada. This chapter was interesting, though, so I'm not that mad about it.
No, you're not.
She's in the throes of one of the mind-altering visions that Murtagh promised Gal would have in store, but former Queen President is not to be daunted by the very fabric of reality melting around her. Not our girl. She cycles through two pretty classic scary visions with like bats in the dark, being choked by vines. But the third vision is a little, classic scary stuff.
Classic. Those old gems.
I mean, they come up in Harry Potter. So
oh my God.
They must be just classic terrifying things. But the third vision she has is a little more insidious, I think. She's in an alternate reality where she and Murtagh have been together for years and they have children, but she's afflicted in this other life with a memory disorder. So we have a little bit of like meta mind fucking going on here. And it reminded me so much of Nynaeve's trial in the third archway in Wheel of Time.
Hell yes.
But we don't get quite as much time to like build up the tragic tension in this idealized life because thanks to real Murtagh's prep work, Nasuada knows it's a ruse as soon as illusion Murtagh's mind touches her. She's like, not as sad as my emo Murtagh, so you can't be real.
Good for her too. She would have been fucked.
Yes. Yeah. So we flash to a new vision where Nasuada is being attacked by Urgles and Kull and Razak, which is horrifying. And she's just like sitting there restrained. She can't move. They're all charging her down. And she laughs at Galbatorix's weak sauce and thinks back on the progression of hallucinations he's put her through and the way Murtagh's warning has come in clutch again and again. That's most of this chapter.
Yeah.
And we know Galbatorix is furious with her resilience in the face of this tactic. But I have to imagine also, like, it would be scary to see her like cold, unyielding mental control if you're Galbatorix. Like, not much could him, but I'd imagine that would have to.
Well, she's already killed someone with a spoon.
Yes.
And now she's doing this. And you're like, well, Jesus.
It's shocking. I don't know that we can really draw any like greater meaning about the story or Galbatorix by diving deeper into like all the details of all of these visions, except for one thing that does seem to be coming up repeatedly is Nasuada's increasingly positive disposition towards Murtagh. He's obviously saving her ass here. He really is.
Yeah.
Credit where credit's due. But her thoughts return to him over and over, and it's her belief that he will honor his word to her that allows her to resist this assault as much as him actually following through. So like she clearly has a deep-seated belief that he's like a good person and he's trying, which your boy totally does come through. So that's good.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
Yes, he still visits her and talks with her and assures her that he's working on an escape plan. And he even gives her like hallucination resisting pro tips, like looking for inconsistencies in the visions. I thought this was a really cool little bit of like magic system trivia because it makes a lot of sense, I think, with what we know about the magic. Murtagh explains that even though Gal is drawing on and directing like all the collective memories of the Eldinari and their erstwhile riders to create these illusions, like that's all of what he's harnessing. Yeah. Even all that amassed power will have discrepancies when it comes to the details. And it's just something like I find to be so true. Like in an investigation, Dane, details matter. That is what you have to pay attention to. That was just for you. So the chapter ends as Nasuada cycles through more and more hallucinations, noticing the small gaps are increasing in frequency, which she thinks might be like even Gal and the Eldinari wearing out their power. And I have a little headcanon too that like in addition to that, they're actually starting to lose it a little bit, like facing off against the immovable force that is Nasuada. Like they can't keep it together. It'd be scary. Either way, we fade out on our eternally badass former Queen President just laughing in the face of the fundamentally evil, insurmountably powerful, insane murder wizard Emperor. We love to see it. She's so cool. Top tier.
I'm glad you got that chapter because there's no way I would have had as much enthusiasm about that. So
it sucks. It's really sad and scary. But
I was creeped out the whole time.
But I feel like she's just, it's cool to watch her just like flex that muscle and be like,
game
take it, bitch.
Yeah. Just like, you like that she's like, fuck you, Gal.
Yes, I really do. I know. Maybe it's your connection to Gal that prevents you from being so excited about it.
I went a little method. I will be honest.
know.
Chapter 50.
He's just misunderstood.
He's just misunderstood. I'm just kidding. I'm not a Galbatorix apologist.
No.
I just play him on TV.
Yes.
Chapter 53, A Question of Character. We snap back to Aragon falling in mud.
Oh.
So the spirit quest is going well.
Great.
But Aragon's just he's really just chilling, thinking about
Aw.
Angela and how he wished she was there just to tell him his true name because, of course, she probably knows his true name.
Yeah.
I love that even he's like, she knows everything.
Why wouldn't she?
Yeah. It's been a day and a half sitting around thinking about their names. Glader, unfortunately, doesn't know, which is a surprise if he's a big know-it-all, so maybe confirmation that he's not. But he also says that discovering their true names on their own would be so much better than them telling them.
I mean, yes, I think this is Glader seeing what we see, which is it's only worth it if you suffer for it.
It's so true.
He's like, yeah, it's not really a thing if I just tell you. You have to you have to cry for a while. And you're like, okay.
I love the dragons, though, because either way, they're like the confidence, the vain, the egotistical creatures that they are.
Yeah.
Probably is good at it.
Yes.
Anyway, he's just always showing it in some way.
Yeah.
Aragon starts to dwell on the fact that he doesn't even know Saphira's true name, which bothers him because he figured out Sloane so easily.
That's such a good point. I feel like we must have said it in that episode, but I'll say it again. Like, that has to be the person he understands to his core, like that deeply. It had to be that guy.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a
That
bummer.
sucks.
He thinks he should know Saphira simply because they've been soul-bound since she was born,
Yeah.
which does make a certain sort of sense, but I think I disagree. I think it might actually be harder to know the true names of people you care about a great deal, people you're very close with. I think you kind of are blind sometimes to other facets of them.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, in the same way, it'd be hard to know your own true name. I think when you're that close to somebody, you start to look at them the same way you look at yourself. You understand them very well.
Exactly. Anyway, we find out that they did do an exercise where Saphira and Aragon shared the flaws they see in each other.
Amazing.
And if they weren't close enough before, they must have been really added another layer to that trauma bond. It sounds brutal.
Yes.
Especially since Glader joined in.
Could you imagine?
No.
Just you, your best friend, and your teacher.
Hey, you know what, guys? You know what we should do, Kevin?
You know what else you're
Jackie?
bad at?
We should all just sit around after we record this pod and just tell each other everybody's flaws. Can't wait. No, it's just horrible.
Yeah.
The whole thing's horrible. My favorite is that Saphira would not accept that she was vain. I love that.
Why would she? Dane, we've talked about it a little bit with Nasuada before. Is it vanity if you really are better than everyone else?
She's like, I am better. What do you? I don't get it. Aragon has trouble accepting his arrogance, but I think he has some deeper flaws, if I'm being honest, and I'm surprised that's the one he got caught up on.
Yeah.
I'll be real honest with you guys. This whole process gets Aragon freaking out about his confrontation with Galbatorix. It seems like the reality of the conflict and what it might mean for him and Saphira if they lose is starting to hit him.
Okay.
And we've heard a lot about what would happen to the world, but Aragon has rarely meditated on what being a mind slave to Galbatorix would look and feel like.
Yeah.
And I think this is exactly the time he'd be grappling with that.
That makes sense.
Aragon tries to cure himself of his inability to see his faults. He basically comes to the conclusion the reason most people don't know their true selves is because most people are completely unaware of what their actual faults are, not what they think their faults are.
Yeah.
In a turn of events that surprises absolutely nobody, though, Saphira freaks as she stumbles into her true name. And I love this. She is better than her rider in every way. It makes sense, though.
It's probably part of her true name.
Yeah, he has to hear it.
Aw.
When she shares it, Aragon says it changes how she looks. She seems to glow with starlight, making her even more real.
Yes, I loved that. He's like, somehow you've like become more flawed to me, but also more beautiful.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Her name is described as majestic,
Of
but
course.
also sad, as it designates her as the last female of her kind.
Right.
It also proclaims her love for Aragon and somehow encompasses all the other aspects of her personality. The impression Aragon gets is one of fire, beauty, and grandeur.
Yes.
It's a fitting name for her because, of course, she's the best.
Yeah.
At that point, Aragon cries happy tears, overwhelmed
So
by the
nice.
realization that he is bonded with such a wonderful being.
Yeah.
He sits excitedly listening to Saphira describe what she learned about herself. However, underneath the joy, he also feels a touch of bitterness about not being able to find his true name.
That's fair. That's
He's
fair.
like hiding it from her.
Yeah.
He's like, "Ugh, that's so great for you.
Bear it, Aragon. Grit your way through it.
Saphira goes to bed, and Aragon stays up, starting to lose control of his emotions here a little bit.
Yeah.
He decides to go for a walk, and Glader advises him to leave his weapons and armor behind, suggesting that if he's going to face danger, he should face it alone.
Is this a kind of a Nasuada move?
Yes,
here?
another one trying to take out these brothers.
Yeah.
And this is giving big Spirit Quest energy.
Yeah.
And I had to say, I think he should at least be able to bring Brisingar.
Okay.
That's for sure a part of him at this point. We've gone over it.
Yeah, it's got to be a part of his true name.
Yeah, I mean, how could it not be?
Yeah.
He made it with Rune and Elder.
Yes.
We read all about that sword.
All about it.
We know everything about that sword. It better be a part of his true name.
Importantly, so does Aragon.
Exactly.
Because he can summon the essence of that sword, Dane. Another thing we read about extensively.
Okay, here we go. The answer is he summoned the essence because it's part of his true name. We figured it out.
Yes. That makes me feel a little bit better,
Yeah.
to be honest.
If you could record my eyes rolling, Kevin, that would be great. But now we have a young man traveling to find himself. He runs and he runs and he runs. He runs until he can no longer run. He runs to some rubble and starts to move it to clear a courtyard, working himself to the bone and thinking, just when you're getting that, sorry, that's so funny. Just when we're getting that Garden State moment, a 6-foot-tall snail charges Aragon. You heard me right. More giant snails.
Yes.
This is a crucial part of Spirit Quests. Aragon teases and taunts it in the ancient language. He hits the shell after passing it. It's crazy.
I forgot about that. I was like, yes, go off, King. Talk your shit. Get that snail.
So stupid.
It was, I weirdly liked it. I was like,
I mean, I liked it too, but I was also like, what is happening in this
yes,
book?
it was wild.
He successfully gets the snail to turn its snail tail into feet, and Aragon continues cleaning. After hours go by, he's done. So he climbs a giant pillar to sit on its top, cross-legged with his palms up. Aragon has gone full monk.
Yes.
Full ancient philosopher sitting above a ruin, deep in meditation about his identity. Despite his extreme exhaustion, coldness, and hunger, or maybe because of them, he experiences a unique clarity of mind.
Yes.
He feels a sense of detachment from his body, almost floating. And I think our farmer is truly meditating. He sits there for hours until the new dawn sun hits his face.
It's beautiful, actually, this scene.
It is really pretty. Eventually, Aragon asks a question of himself that I don't think we've ever heard him ask, actually.
Yeah.
What does he truly want?
Yes.
And he realizes he doesn't want to return to being a farmer in Carval.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to avoid his responsibilities as a writer.
Yeah.
His deepest desire is to see Arya. Okay. In that moment of truth,
Great.
I was like, I'll brush over that real quick. Aragon decides he will never go back home
Yeah.
and accepts how much he's changed since that first book.
Yeah.
He's not the little bean farmer who left with Brom all those years ago,
Oh, Aragon.
which at long last leads him to his true name, a name that makes him vibrate with laughter and tears because all his mistakes and imperfections are laid bare.
Yeah.
It is a weaker, more flawed name than he wanted,
Yeah.
but it's still a name he can be proud of.
Yes.
And he did it!
He did
He
it!
completed self-discovery. It's over. Roll credits.
Not
We're done,
roll
Kevin.
credits.
Woo-hoo-hoo.
Not roll credits. More summaries. Spirit Quest. Check. What now? Yes.
Thank you, Kevin.
It's the best.
He
We're
got
so
the gravity of the situation.
I mean, it isn't. If ever there were a moment for air horns, Dane.
It was that moment right there.
Home.
Oh,
I was kind of hoping, we could get Kevin in post to just add like yoga music to the background of this entire episode. That does take us to chapter 54, the Vault of Souls. This chapter starts with Aragon and Saphira back at the Rock of Kuthian, finally ready to speak friend and enter. It's
Yes.
time. Glader insists on a balanced breakfast before they enter the unknown, and Aragon and Saphira feel more bonded than ever after they've exchanged their true names. Full bellies, radical vulnerability. I really do love this for them. Glader speaks his true name first, and I love the description of his too, sounding like a regal fanfare that like contains multitudes. I was missing at least a little hint at Glader's sass in his true name, but I
Yeah.
guess a girl really can't have it all. That's fine.
it should have been there.
Thank you. Aragon's mind was not on the same track as mine at all. Well, whatever, because all he's thinking is that he wants to know Arya's true name. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that really seems like a long shot, my guy. Like, she's barely consistently nice to you. I don't think she's going to reveal the essence of her being to you anytime soon, but
I mean, yeah, this guy can't even get a movie date with Arya.
No.
And he's thinking about getting the name of her soul.
Yes.
it's insane.
No, it's not a good plan for him. This tough look for him. He just realized his flaws. You would think he would know this is one of them. But here we are.
That's why I was like, well, arrogance is your problem. I don't think that's your problem, dude.
Well, it is arrogant to assume.
Yeah, maybe it is.
It fits. It tracks. Saphira says her true name to the rock, and Aragon is the anchor of this team, saying his name with his mind at the rock, after which a doorway opens in the stone. A massive tunnel slopes from the door into the ground, and Glader's first thought is that everything else on this cursed island, this tunnel should not exist, which I was like, I think I said a couple episodes ago, I'm fundamentally pessimistic. I was like, uh-oh. But he thinks it must have been built before the riders came to Vrowengard, and it's just ominous as fuck as they decide to head straight for whatever awaits as they cross the threshold. Saphira is the last one to come in, and the door slams shut behind her. It's very spooky.
That is very spooky.
They descend into the earth for an interminable amount of time before they feel warm air and see a faint glow in the distance. And as they approach the tunnels and they come upon a massive archway that seems to lead into an empty chamber, they know there must be some deeply hidden magic here, but they have no choice but to cross this final threshold, Dane. And that's where this chapter ends. What's in the box?
That's where it ends. They die.
Oh.
That's over.
It's been really
All right,
real.
wrap it
Thank
up.
you, listeners. No.
Chapter 55, Lacuna, part the first. Okay, so Aragon and Saphira are in a circular room that is about 200 feet across.
Okay.
In the center is a large, very hot pit that keeps the chamber nice and toasty.
Amazing.
Aragon and Saphira find themselves surrounded by shiny objects nestled into the wall and 2 tiers of arena-style benching lining the whole room.
Okay.
It's all very mysterious.
Yeah.
When suddenly a metal man with a dragon head, clad only in a metal loincloth and outfitted with a shield and rider's sword, approaches them.
Yes, a robot dragon. I was like, oh, what?
Yeah.
What is happening?
I do remember
we did go to
distinctly.
space. We are astronauts. Why not robots?
Why not? This golem or Dragontar heads towards them and roars. It's,
Well, I mean, that's what dragons do,
I
Dane.
guess.
Even robot ones.
I feel like I took drugs halfway through what we've been doing. There's giant snails.
It's your spirit quest. I dosed you so you would find your true name.
We'll do that live on the podcast.
Surprise.
Its mind presses against Aragon's, and it feels like it contains a sea of even more minds.
Ooh.
It stabs into Aragon and Saphira's consciousness, and Aragon has a crazy experience as a barrage of memories play simultaneously in his mind.
Yeah.
While separate thoughts seem to explore his consciousness and control his body's movements,
Wild.
even making him lift Brisingar.
Oh, yeah.
Amidst this insane chaos that I cannot imagine experiencing,
No.
he realizes that all the information is being scrutinized by several beings.
Yeah.
This intense invasion of the mind would be so disturbing to me.
Yes.
His whole life, I would
Every
hate that.
memory for his entire life. Yeah, I could not.
Not only is this happening to him over the course of hours,
Ooh,
which is
That's too long.
insane, but it's also happened to Saphira and presumably Glader. It's
Yeah.
insane. All of this is horrible. Having to experience this for even a few moments would be terrible.
Yeah.
But hours?
No, couldn't be me.
When it's over, the metal dragon-headed man, Dragontar, golem, robot, welcomes them. Yeah,
I think you nailed it.
nailed it. Welcomes them to the Vault of Souls, and they finally get to look around and realize that all those shiny things, those things in the wall alcoves, are Eldenari.
Yes!
Tons of them. This discovery fills Aragon with hope. Finally, they can win. And as he looks around with all the optimism in his heart, he makes an even more wonderful discovery. The benches are rimming the room. Each hold mini dragon eggs.
Yes! Congratulations, Kevin. You did it.
He did it.
I am glad we finally have a glimmer of hope because this war was really starting to look bleak as hell to me. I do always... Quite a note to backtrack on, but I always picture the dragon robot having like a very like futuristic like Jetsons like Siri voice being like, welcome to the Vault of Souls.
Like it's just empty and he's like, welcome to the Vault of Souls.
Yes.
Wonderful.
But that does take us to chapter 6, Lacuna, part the second.
Ooh.
I did actually, while we were reading it, Lacuna was like scratching something in my brain, like
Ooh,
trying to
that
get
sounds
out.
uncomfortable.
It is. So I had to look it up. I was like, that sounds like something I know. It is a word that means like a missing portion of a book or a manuscript.
Ah, cool.
I think it's derived from some Latin word.
I've never
something,
questioned
something.
that. I've read that.
You're like, this is just make-em-ups.
I don't know what's happening, but
Well,
cool. Lacuna
I think-
part 1.
Yeah. I think because it never comes up like in the course of the chapters.
Yeah.
It's not like a piece of world building or lore or anybody's name that we know about. So I was like, what?
It's a little dragon egg for us.
Yeah, exactly. Alligator egg, maybe.
Oh, God.
So Glader starts to reveal that Oramus was somehow involved in the creation of the Vault of Souls as this
Okay.
chapter opens, but the consciousness interrupts to introduce himself, and it turns out he is Vrail's dragon's Eldenari Umarath.
Hell yeah.
He speaks for all the Eldenari in the vault, but notably, he isn't exactly in charge of them because a bunch of them are actually wild dragons, so that is fun. A little bit of that drama you talked about.
Yes.
He also introduces the robot dragon as Quarok, hunter of the Needwall and bane of the Urgles, who is immediately the most metal character in the series, obviously, literally. He's the last line of defense that the riders of old had planned for the Eldenari, and his metal chest cavity contains an Eldenari that I think powers him up. I feel like I could read a million books about this dude. They give a little bit of his lore and backstory, and I was like, more.
Like, what?
I know, but there isn't time. Aragon and Saphira are both struggling to believe what they're seeing, but Saphira comes around first because her insane ass jumps straight to calling the Eldenari cowards for hiding from Gal.
Arya has for sure rubbed up on her.
Yes, they are one and the same. Umarath explains, he keeps a pretty level head. He explains how the Riders Executive Board decided to create the Vault of Souls when they realized how much power Galbatorix had managed to amass and how vulnerable Vrowengard was. So this obviously bore fruit. It was a good idea that they
Yeah.
did it.
Shareholders famously always making great decisions for everyone
That's
else.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's this unfettered capitalism that's really saved the world in the end. So Umarath explains that the depth of the Vault of Souls is actually the thing that's effectively masking this mass of consciousnesses as deep earth energy, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting.
And then the molten rock that's below this pit is both an incubator for the eggs and a light source for the Eldenari's photosynthesis. I was a little surprised to see this come up, but please refer to our season 3 episode 9 deep dive for your full Eldenari lesson if you too were surprised that they replenish their energy like plants.
I've already covered it.
Dane covered it, and we should all know it. Umarath also explains that any rider or dragon with knowledge of the vault agreed to have their memories wiped to ensure total, complete secrecy. And one alarming detail in his monologue, he says that the vault contains, quote, but a small portion of the Eldenari once on Vrowengard. So I think we're to assume Gal has many more Eldenari than we see here, which I don't. And all from, too, breaking them like one at a time painstakingly and enslaving them. Chilling to contemplate, but we are moving along.
I mean, he's a hard worker.
He really pulled himself up by
By the
his
bootstraps.
cape straps. Doesn't he wear a cape?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Of course he wears a cape.
Yes, I don't know what I was thinking. If he didn't before, he does now. Umarath also tells the sad story of good old nuclear Thuviel, so we got a little more backstory on that guy.
I was like, when this came out, I was like, oh, Thuviel's coming back up. Okay.
Yeah, already so soon. But I guess Umarath says that guy actually agreed to take on the whole destruction of worlds job when he knew defeat was going to be inevitable. So that was like their final kind of like panic button.
Okay.
And that is what created a ruse for the destruction of the Eldenari that Gal would believe, while also rendering the island virtually uninhabitable for Gal to take over all in one fell swoop. So I do love synergistic, self-immolating solutions around here. That's just fun.
Yeah, it turns out Thuvidel was a bomb.
Why? Then Umarath gives us a rundown on what the Eldenari have been up to since they woke from their magically induced comas. And it turns out they've been keeping tabs, Dane. They've been picking up on the vast web of like thoughts and energies that crisscross Alagasia, watching the dumpster fire reality show of Gal's Reign unfold before them. And you used to work in reality TV, Dane. Do you think this watches more like a Real Housewives franchise? Or do you think we have more of a Big Brother vibe going on here?
Totally Big Brother vibe, I think.
Yeah.
You can watch these people. I think you can watch them 24 hours a day if you want, which is totally bonkers to me.
Horrifying.
It's also a little more boring because of that, especially if you go back to those early seasons of Big Brother.
Yes.
That show is for the true reality nerds.
Unwatchable.
Yes. Real Housewives is much more planned, with segment producers working hand in hand with the talent, and the talent wanting to do specific things or refusing to do others. The interview process is done while editing, so the producers can lead the questions into a narrative that best fits each episode, and those women know what the people want while at the same time wanting to seem cool. It's drama incarnate, if you will.
You're so right.
And that is my honest answer to that question.
And to be clear, that is not what you think Gal has been like.
Well,
recruiting different Forsworn, segment producing their lives as he pits them against one another.
This is why Big Brother now has like the episodes, because they cut all the best moments. So, it's kind of a cross between the two.
No, I think you're right. I think you're obviously,
because I mean,
reality TV expert.
I imagine Gal's doing like Pilates. He's washing shuriken. Maybe
he's probably had a couple therapy appointments lately. Things have been a little hard on him.
Been tough. I mean, I'm sure he's boring most of the time. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. Okay, I'm with you. You've swayed me. I just want everything to be Real Housewives. Don't come for me. I always say I'm basic. I really mean that. So it turns out the Eldenari, back to this story.
Sorry, Jesus. We're doing. Is this Aragon?
Yes. So it turns out the Eldenari have been nudging people and events to succeed in resisting Galbatorix for decades, including helping Brahm murder 3 of the Forsworn and helping the dude who stole Saphira's egg escape from Gal. They obviously gave the prophecy to Solemnbum. We know that now, which for me means that like all of Angela's dragon knucklebone stuff may have been prophecy. But the Solemnbum addendum is less like Aragon being drawn by destiny and more this like wise and powerful collective giving him the least subtle hint ever to make sure he aces his test. You know what I mean? It's not just like the universe writ large. It's like, okay, this has a purpose. And I don't know to what extent, like we've been saying since he found the bright steel under the Manoa tree, since that part came true, we can assume all of Angela's shit is true too. But I don't know, since they are kind of separate.
No, it was
how that
death of someone close to him and the betrayal that was right about Angela. And I just think like I think it's more that the solutions have been presented where Solemnbum said, not necessarily all of this other stuff, just that like he told us ahead of time. You know what I mean? But I do get what you're saying. This is not part of that prophecy writ large. It's not just like spooky universe energy. It's these dead dragons. Totally different. Super. Just the ghost of hundreds of dragons. Super different, Dane. But back to these messy bitches and their meddling. They thought Brahm's son might prove a fit match for Saphira, so they were the ones who nudged the egg to appear to Aragon when Arya teleported it. And they also popped up at the dragon twin elven holiday ritual in front of the god that's not a god to heal Aragon's back. And I do wonder why they would go through all that work to steal one of Gal's eggs and get it to Aragon when they might have nudged Brahm or Ormus or even Arya, who's like out in the world, loose on the world, being a badass. Like they could have nudged any of those people to retrieve all the eggs that are in the vault, but like they're dragons and presumably they have their reasons. I mean, I'm gonna get into it. Aragon is understandably pretty overwhelmed, but he thanks the Eldenari for all of their help, which good manners, proud of you, farm boy. And then it occurs to him to ask if they've been helping our preternaturally lucky brother cousin as well. And this was hilarious to me. Eternal props to these disembodied dragons because they're just like, Stronghammer? That guy doesn't need shit from us. Have you seen him? I was like, yes. I loved it. It was perfect. But in all seriousness, it is such a nice moment to hear them praise Aragon and Saphira for how much they've overcome and done. And our sweet babies pledge their service to their new council of teachers. Aww. And these aren't regular teachers, Dane. They're bloodthirsty teachers. We love to see it. They're ready to get the fuck out of this cave and take the fight to Urbane. They've been waiting. Hell yeah. They'll leave 5 Eldenari and the robot dragon to protect the nearly 250 eggs that are in the vault. Crazy. I know. And the other 130 Eldenari will get wily. They'll teach Aragon lost magics, and they'll fend off Gal's larger force of Eldenari long enough for Aragon to strike. That's the plan. Yeah. They're sick of waiting, and so am I, so this sounds like a good enough plan. Let's do it. The robot dragon starts packing up the Eldenari while Umaroth, Glader, and Saphira go over the Google Maps like fastest route to Urbane. You know, Yeah.
Balancing the fastest route versus most fuel efficient and
you gotta check traffic.
so important. Yeah. And Aragon is just over by himself feeling the deep weight of this wild plot twist.
In a lot of ways, hold on. In a lot of ways, I feel bad for Aragon because these are all dragons, right?
Yes.
And then it's just this teen, and he's just like, all right.
Hey, Dane, that's not true. There's also the robot dragon.
Sorry, I figured the dragon.
He's got a man's body.
You're right.
Aragon can relate to him.
I just imagine that must be so like, all right, so I'll be the rider. It's just me. I'm going to have to deal with these people all the time.
Yeah.
It must be so hard.
Well, and then especially hot on the heels of him like realizing that part of his true calling to his core, one of the things that helped him find his deepest essence is like fulfilling his duty to the riders and dragons. And then they find all of these and he's like, I guess that's still true, but fuck, it feels different now than it did yesterday.
Didn't think that would happen quite so soon. But here we are.
Wild. He does notice how the existence of the eggs, just the fact that they're out here in the world, has lifted a sadness from Saphira. I liked that a lot.
Yeah.
And the contact with the Eldenari has rekindled some small happiness in Glader. So everybody wins.
Except for our boy Aragon.
But ultimately, Dane, we have a war to win, and we have to get out of this cave.
It's all about the wall.
It is all about the wall for now. I also just imagine Glader being like, dude, Frank, what you been up to, bud?
Hey, bud, I missed you. I haven't seen you since, was it Super Bowl 16? What was that?
Yes. This next bit was also a little bit funny to me because Umaroth has a sweet trick that will allow the Eldenari to travel without encumbering Saphir, because some of them are like really gigantic. They're all made out of solid crystal and gemstone, so you imagine they're quite heavy. And Umaroth says he needs Aragon to cast a quick spell to basically put the soul gems in a pocket dimension. And I love that Umaroth tried repeatedly to explain the mechanics of the spell to them, but Aragon, Saphira, and even Glader were just like, dude, what? What does that mean?
Also, what an insight into Rail.
Yes.
That Umaroth's like, no, my writer. Okay. How do I explain this?
How do I explain this to you? And eventually Umaroth's just like, listen, you don't need to know how. You don't need to know why. Just like, here's what you do. The bean farmer, I guess, does not need to know how interdimensional space works. I guess that makes a certain sort of sense.
Well, also, just like on the heels of this new responsibility, I'm just like, all right, so pocket dimensions, they exist. They're a thing. Here's what we need you to do. He's like, what?
He doesn't need to know how, Dane. He just needs to use it. So Umaroth basically casts the spell through Aragon, and I love the description of the Eldenari's power, like surging through him and the pile of gems, like folding in on itself. It was very, very fun. Very cool. Then this beefy world-bending chapter ends as Umaroth tells them that to protect the eggs still within the vault, they all, including the Eldenari, will forget its existence as soon as they leave. They'll get their memories back if they manage to beat Gal. Big if doing a lot of heavy lifting, but it doesn't make the whole thing makes their departure, I think, a little bit bittersweet here. But again, and I cannot emphasize this enough, Dane, we have a fucking war to finish. So they head out having secured the ultimate bag. Let's go.
That takes us
Let's do it.
Let's do it. That takes us to chapter 57, Return. So we are back on the road, and boys, the future looking good for the good guys. Fucking reunited, and it feels good. The dragons are reunited with the fucking new rider, man. And it's time, dude. It's time. The moment, I'm so amped.
Jacked.
Yeah, the moment as we've been building for this entire series.
Yes.
Is getting close.
Frighteningly close.
It's frightening close. Aragon does forget about the eggs.
I know.
And that's sad.
As soon as he steps over the threshold, he's like, there's something.
He's like, oh, there's something good I'm remembering. But it's gone. But the hope for future is kind of lost. But hey, you can't have everything. No. This is still a top tier day.
Life's about balance. Listen, it's the lows that make the highs feel higher. It's okay.
You dropped your ice cream, but you're at Disneyland.
Yes.
They waste no time and hop straight on Saphira, heading towards Urobane with all possible ways. Saphira takes off, and the final battle is almost here. We're gonna do it. Yes.
It's time, Gal. You're going down, bitch.
We're coming for you.
I'm so amped. But before we can Calm down, Dane.
I'm sorry.
Jesus.
I'm so amped.
Before we can depose Alagazia's just and rightful ruler, I do have a couple of things I want to talk about in the writing of this section.
Okay.
That's right.
I guess.
It's time to do a little analysis of our Vision Quest episode.
It's time for analysis.
So, first,
I'm just kidding.
I'm telling you, we're going to add it in post.
Okay.
I feel strongly about that. No, first, I want to address the elephant in the room here. This is the episode where our main protagonist goes on a spirit quest for self-actualization and radical acceptance, and his success at this earns him his ultimate boon to aid him in the fight against the final boss. The theme here is obviously self-discovery, and it's something a large chunk of this series has been aimed at, from wondering who his dad is all the way back in the 3rd chapter of the first book to honing his own moral compass over the course of literally just too many situations to count, to his like stoic / Buddhist / Zen training, to his numerous maybe some would say too many identity affecting affiliations, his oaths, his adoptions. So as much as that theme is veganism, who can forget erstwhile veganism? So as much as that theme is abundantly clear throughout the series, and especially obviously in these chapters, I don't really feel like I have much to add to it. Christopher Paolini has been putting in the work, dude, for basically 4 whole books to take us on this journey of self-discovery. We've reached its zenith with our main character here, and it is all just there in the text. That's the theme. But there is one thing I want to talk about in these chapters, and it is the writing choice to break from like the grand swelling climax of this piece of Aragon's plotline to spend a chapter with Nasuada. I thought that was really interesting for something obviously Christopher Paolini has been working so hard to build up.
Yeah. Sorry, I laughed because I thought you were going to say the dragon, the robot. So
I would.
was like,
listen,
oh, here she goes.
If I could have found like a whole deep dive of lore on that dude,
Yeah.
you can bet your ass I would have been like, this is not analysis anymore. This is my deep dive, and we're only going to talk about that guy. No, there was an interesting writing choice, and I do want to talk about it. I think there are a lot of writers who might have been like tempted to just laser focus on the main protagonist in this pivotal moment. And there are pros and cons to doing that versus what Paolini did here. But I think by cutting away to Nasuada, I started thinking about like what he's trying to show us. Why would he have made that choice? And for me, I think this actually works on a couple different levels. And the first is something that's come up before as a theme for Aragon and Nasuada in tandem, and it's the way they both excel at drawing strength from within. And it must be a strong through line here because I've already called back to it once this season. Back in Brissinger, both characters hone this skill, Aragon soldiering through exhaustion after Hellgrind, and Nasuada digging deep to win the trial of the Long Knives. That was the same episode. And now in this section, when we could have just watched Aragon look inward to ascend to another level of consciousness, basically, I like that we're having this idea mirrored again with Nasuada in this book, seeing the true horrors she's able to survive with her unshakable mastery of her inner strength. It's working for both of them again here, where Nasuada is facing something horrible.
I was like, yeah, they're both doing the same thing. They're both going through exactly the same issues.
But they're using the same strength. It was kind of the same last time.
Totally
Aragon
right.
was exhausted and just like dicking around with Sloane, and Nasuada was almost killing herself to like gain an ally for the Varden. So like it feels very much the same here as it did back then.
So true.
And the other thing I think the Nasuada aside draws attention to is the peril of being disconnected from your identity. While Aragon is trying to truly understand himself, we're seeing Gal execute a brutal strategy aimed at getting Nasuada to dissociate, with the stakes in both plots being the fate of the entire continent.
Yes.
And more than anything, what helped this connection click in my mind was the way Christopher Paolini kept the tone very like dreamy while writing both characters. Nasuada obviously is just living outside of reality, outside of time and space. She's tripping hard. But I got the sense that while Aragon walks around Vrowengard, he kind of is too. Like all that writing has a lot of a dreamy quality to it. We joke a lot about like the peyote and the sweat tents, but that is how it's written. That's kind of how he feels as he sits up there and he like has this clarity he's never had before. It's a good thing he and Arya microdosed that one time because he's a little bit used to the sensation. He didn't just freak the fuck out. Could you imagine going on a trip that hard for your first time?
No.
Dane? That's bad. So now that I think we've all ascended to identity nirvana, Dane, are you ready to dive deep into what you've learned and accepted about yourself? I'm sure that's the subject of the deep dive, right?
not in your
Who
life.
are you? Who are you really? Say more about that.
I already told you I opened up my laptop and saw myself, and I was the hater. That's about as much identity we're getting. Deep dive. For this week's deep dive, I want to dive deep into the wonderful and happy future that is possible now that we found fresh dragon eggs.
Yes.
What
Farm
does
fresh.
this even mean for the future of the world, assuming Aragon can be Gal? First, I just need to come out right now and say it. I was so happy as a 19-year-old when I found out about these freaking eggs. It's awesome that the dragons don't die. Our little bean farmer can win this war. The riders might once again return to the world of Algasia. Hell yeah, brother. Woo. With that said,
brother, indeed.
we need to chill, Jax.
Okay.
We need to calm down.
Okay.
All right.
You're right.
Let's dive in. All right. You need to calm down. It's distracting. Okay. Whew. I'm sorry if you're driving right now. You're like, guys, stop yelling.
We cannot. We are so... Listen, you don't read these books, this closely for this long without like getting seriously amped when something finally pays off.
It's going to pay off. And I think there are 3 main things that we can muse on with all these eggs.
Yes.
First, the numerous wild dragon eggs. We've heard a good amount about the wild dragons in this series. Yeah. They're just as arrogant and vain and even more bloodthirsty than our riders' dragons, which means it's probably safe to say they'll likely have strong personalities with little regard for any of the humanoids living in Algasia.
Okay.
The wild dragons also won't have a formal language or the ability to speak like the bonded dragons, which might complicate any misunderstandings that are bound to arise from those strong personalities.
Yeah, I can see that. That makes sense.
Yeah. So with the above, I don't think anyone but Aragon, the bonded dragons, and the elves are going to be particularly excited about the prospect of dozens of new dragons potentially coming back into the world over the coming years. However wonderful and beautiful the dragons are, I think it's safe to assume they're going to be a nuisance to deal with for all the riders. Yeah. It's going to be, Aragon's going to have his hands full.
Yes.
I also have some thoughts on the side effects the wild dragons will have on the nature of the world of Algasia. I was thinking about this too. They have always been described as the embodiment of nature, and wild dragons can also use wild magic. Yeah. So what magics will they use and why? Will there be like weird phenomena like plains full of purple grass, or
that'd be cool.
Like sand that produces its own heat, or something weird and crazy? We don't know, and I think that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Also, will more dragons increase the power through their dragon bond? Okay. We have heard that the elves and humans have declined as the dragons have. Yes. And that the bond made the elves immortal and basically gave them universal access to magic. Yeah. Will this mean that their magical abilities will increase? Right. Will this mean more humans will be born with the ability to cast magic?
That's fun.
I have a lot of questions about this. But I think a lot of the possible outcomes are very exciting for the world.
Yeah, it's very complicating too, I bet.
It's complicated, it's fun, it's exciting. I mean, this is like Big Brother. Okay. Second, what does a new dragon rider order under Aragon's leadership even look like? Yeah. This one's tougher for me to get from the text, but I think we can guess that if Aragon can survive with these new Eldenari.
Oh, yes, right. Big if.
The new riders will look very much like the riders of old. Okay. Aragon has Vrail's dragon, along with hundreds more less knowledgeable dragons who were, for the most part, all brought up in the traditions of the Riders' Ancient Order. Okay. It makes a lot of sense that they will be persuasive because they're much older and full dragon wisdom. Yeah. So Aragon will likely take their lead to train the next generation in much the same way the Riders of Old were trained.
That makes a lot of sense.
I mean, just look at the way he gobbled up that shit at Ormus University. You know what I mean?
He did love stump time, Dane. That is a boy who loves a stump.
He hit it up on a pillar, which is essentially a large stump.
A big man-made stump. It was all stump time in the end.
It's all been stump time.
It's been about the stump time we had along the way.
I think the more interesting problem here is, will they be able to function the same way as before? Yeah. Hrothgar believed the age of the riders was over, and I think Nasuada has given us some insight into her fears about magicians having virtually unchecked power. Yes. Which makes me think of Galbatorix, assuming Aragon can beat the guy. Mm-hmm. Man, is he going to have to do a lot of PR to undo the terror Gal has instilled in people. Also, the order fell from within once before. Yeah. Would people really be interested in trusting such an institution again with such dire potential consequences?
High risk.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But we'll be back to this at the end of the series. Don't you worry. Third, how does this fit in with Aragon being prophesized to leave Algasia and never return? If Aragon and Saphira have to leave Algasia for all time, I can only assume that if he survives Galbatorix, big if, the entire order is going to follow.
Okay, yeah.
And when you think about the first 2 points with dragons being a nuisance and the painful history, it kind of makes sense to leave Alagasia to its own devices. So I think it might be a safe bet to assume Alagasia won't even have a new order of riders to watch over it. I think we can already make that
interesting.
jump.
Do you think the wild dragons follow them as well?
Yeah, because I think ultimately he's in charge of those eggs, too.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
I think, whatever tenuous alliance the wild and bonded dragons have because of Gal holds up through whatever Aragon decides to do.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, because, ultimately even, I hadn't actually said this, or this isn't even in my notes, but Aragon at the end of the day is also going to save dragonkind.
Yeah, if he can pull this shit off.
Yeah, so if he can do this, even the wild dragons will owe their entire existence to Aragon.
Yeah.
So they might be willing to listen a little bit to him. You know what I mean?
That makes sense.
But all of those wonderful and magical possible outcomes for the dragons and their riders are fun and full of whimsy.
Yes, I love that.
You know who hates whimsy?
Oh, who?
The haters. It's time for What the Haters Sing.
Actually, you should do your research, huh? Have you even read it? How you pronounce it?
What are the haters saying?
There is an index in the back, right?
This is overly derivative.
This week, the haters have a feeling that this whole Eldenari and Dragon Egg situation is just one
Boo.
big Deus Ex Machina mess.
Boo.
How lazy they yell.
Boo.
How cheap they cry.
Boo.
They go on at some length, as you can imagine. We've all met
You know what
the
they
haters.
need, Dane? They need some stump time. They need to come to peace with
need to
some of their
relax.
feelings.
So I am sure we all remember from Season 2, Episode 9, Hater segment,
course.
Deus Machina.
Yes.
Refers to the most famous of plot devices where a huge problem is suddenly conveniently solved in a way that feels just a bit random and doesn't really fit with the story's logic.
Okay.
As for randomness, I feel like that critique doesn't hold a lot of water.
Okay.
The Vault of Souls was mentioned in the first book.
Yeah.
And I feel like the Eldenari have been hinted at since Eldest. Mm-hmm. I think the larger issue here is the reveal that so many problems were solved with these Eldenaris throughout the book, and books, plural.
Yeah.
And it could be argued that some of the Eldenari's logic didn't make a whole bunch of sense.
Yes.
They held Braum, but they also did not save him in the end,
Uh-huh.
which on the one hand undermines his achievements and makes his actions just a dash less badass.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, doesn't make much sense if the main goal here was to help Aragon.
Yes.
Right?
Tough look for them.
It's a tough look.
Yeah.
The Eldenari also healed Aragon of his wound from Durza at the Lady Blotner.
Right.
Which makes a logical sense.
Yes.
But I personally always thought it was way cooler being a gift from the spirit of the dragons as a
Okay.
race and more undefined and mysterious.
Yes.
But the haters think this explanation feels strange and opens up a lot of questions about why didn't they heal Oramus and the logic of the decision, which has been debated endlessly online. We're not going to get into it here. They were even involved in getting Saphira's egg to Aragon when Arya sent it to Braum. Again, while this one makes the most logical sense, it also kind of cheapens the experience for the haters who want the possible familial relationship mix-up foreshadowing by the spell going to Aragon instead of Braum.
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, has the entire story just been Eldenari, they complain.
Yeah.
This is Deus Ex Machina, they shriek, Anyway.
Shrieks.
Yeah,
they're escalating.
Yes.
Things are getting heated with these
They're
haters.
getting very mad. The haters don't just take issue with the Eldenari being the explanation for a lot of mysterious past events, though.
Mm-hmm.
They also don't love that the Eldenari are the solution to almost every problem Aragon faces in the future. They can give Aragon and Saphira a fighting chance against Galbatorix by training them in the ancient ways of the writers Gal might not know.
Yes.
They can provide enough power to just bulldoze Murtagh.
Thank God.
And finally, they can just solve the extinction crisis the dragons are facing.
Yes.
And I can concede that there's a lot of problems this discovery is going to solve, but I think that since it's been heavily foreshadowed,
Yes.
I have a hard time understanding why this is upsetting the haters. Convenience? This is just efficient writing, baby.
Yes. I mean, it's one of those yes, of course, that's a lot of problems. That is kind of the point of an ultimate solution, is that it'll make a lot of things easier. There's no reason that needs to be bad just because,
Yeah, and I'm not going to dwell much longer on this, but I want to make one final point. Almost all works of literature contain tropes and plot devices that are well tread.
Yes.
After all, plot devices are just that. Devices, tools, they are used for a reason.
Yeah.
It is reductive to say that any one plot device is going to ruin a story, as a story should be looked at as a whole. It isn't just the cliffhangers, foreshadowing, and MacGuffins, right? It's how the writer uses these tools to create something grander.
Yeah.
Does some of this feel a bit random? I would push back on the haters and say,
No.
not really. But does some of it feel like a very convenient way to explain a host of past things with some inconsistent logic? I can see that. Does it solve a lot of problems Aragon faces in the future? Yes, it absolutely does.
Yeah.
If you like the world and the story, it shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
And if you hate it, what are you doing here in the last third of the fourth book? This is really it for me here.
Okay.
I think this comes down to personal taste, haters, not bad writing, and personally, I'm not bothered by this. I think it's just a convenient tool to use for your hate, you dirty haters. A deus machina of hate, if you will.
Ooh.
That's where I'll end with you today.
Meta hater.
Yes, right. Get down, haters, before I use my MacGuffin on your asses. I've been foreshadowing it for seasons.
Get him, Dane.
Yeah.
I like all your plot devices.
Yes.
They're well used, and they've made this story grander.
Yes, I've been using foreshadowing. Anyway, it's a whole lot of nothing. I mean, this is like, it's one of those things that like I expected this. You know, sometimes I go looking, going, I know what you guys are gonna say.
I get it.
I'm in the mind of a hater. But like, this is one of those ones where I don't get it. Like, I think this is just a taste thing. And it's like, if it's not your taste, I get it. That's fine.
The logical inconsistencies, I think, do seem like the biggest problem here.
Yeah.
But even there, you're just like, well, whatever.
Well, and even that is like mostly subverted expectations, right? Because
yes. What a good point.
Because like, I love Brahm.
Yes.
I want the Brahm book. We've talked about it extensively, right? So like to know that like Brahm maybe wasn't as cool because the Eldenari helped him.
Yeah.
For me, it subverted my expectation in a way that I didn't like.
Yes.
Right. So is that necessarily a writing choice problem, or is that bad, or is that not make sense?
Or do you just not like it?
Exactly.
Yes.
And I think sometimes that happens, especially in large series, especially with logic. The author's going to make some choices that like you're probably not going to like all of them.
Yes.
And
especially when I think in this story, at least, like there's so much about the Eldenari that's like shadowy. We don't know if they can like do magic or do dragon magic, or if they can just like nudge consciousnesses here and there. And so it could all chalk up to like, this is what they could do when they could do it. And like, what are you going to do with that, haters? They tried. They did their best. Do you hate all these Eldenari?
I know.
It's rude.
It's so rude. But I think we should move on because I'm excited to get to the next episode.
Yeah.
I want to start doing. I want to get to the end of this.
Endgame. We're so close, Dane. 3 episodes left.
Can you believe it?
No.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it. Let's get out of here.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening today. We really appreciate it. Make sure to rate and review on Apple Podcasts to be entered into our merch giveaway. Don't forget you're only entered if you confirm with an email to isthisjustfantasypod@gmail.com. It's the same place you can also hit us up with some questions, feedback, and recommendations for other books to cover on the show. And remember, you need to do that soon. If you want to like us to do something, Murtag will be out, and we will already be preparing for the next season. So you need to start giving us these recommendations if you want to get in,
because we really want to read things you want to listen to. Ideally,
we want to do stuff that everyone who's into the podcast wants.
The couple of suggestions, like the few that have come through so far, we've been really excited. Already align with things we were considering, so we have a good feeling about you guys. We know you like what we like, so send through whatever you think. Because we think it'll probably be a good idea for us.
And if you're thinking, they don't need my recommendation, we do. We want your recommendation. We want you to keep listening.
Yeah.
We're in a book club together, man.
Yes.
Let's be
Everybody gets a vote on what book to read next month for the book club.
Exactly.
Well, if you want to keep pace and read along with us, on the next episode we will be covering, with probably less shouting, but like never any guarantees on this podcast.
Who can say?
We'll be covering chapter 58, The City of Sorrows, through chapter 62, Over the Wall and Into the Maw.
Hell yeah.
Or is this just fantasy? We're just two nerds and we love our fantasy. Come on and listen to us next time. Find out what our deep dive will be.